Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the next installment of COVID Conversations.
Hi there.
Today, we're going to talk about a topic that has really been a theme since the beginning. We've talked about how many things have shifted, but since the beginning, there's been this overwhelming feeling of anxiety. And anxiety is pretty adaptive in this situation. I mean, it's a pretty normal response because we know that anxiety often comes up when there is a lack of control.
Right. And a lack of predictability. And of
Yep,
course, nothing is lacking control or predictability more these days than the COVID-19 crisis.
totally. And we think about what our body does when it gets into anxiety, because anxiety is definitely in the mind and in the body, right? It influences how we think, and it also influences what happens in our body and can send us into a stress response, which is like a whole new segment of our bodies. Things just take over, hormones are produced, and we perceive we have less control over what's going on in our head and our body, which is really kind of a reflection of the lack of control in the world too.
And I've been pretty aware that some of the ways that we are having to cope with the COVID crisis actually exacerbate anxiety, even though they're obviously important and helpful from a health standpoint. So for example, social distancing. That is really important for all of us in terms of maintaining and flattening the curve and even reducing the number of new cases. But because social connection is such a buffer for anxiety for some people, that I think exacerbates anxiety. Even things as simple as wearing a mask. You can't read people's facial expressions as well. I think that's a little scary and unnerving. And even just the fact that something's covering your nose and mouth, if you're trying to be outside walking, it changes how your body is inhaling oxygen. And for people that have anxiety sensitivity, I think it can be really quickly misperceived as an anxiety attack if you've ever suffered from panic or panic attacks before. So even these things that are so critically important for us coping right now are also triggers to more anxiety.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And I think that there are a lot of things we can do to help deal with anxiety at baseline and now in this crisis. And they're going to look a little bit different now because, just like you said, we're changing the way that we're able to use those coping tools.
Mm-hmm.
And Robin and I have put together, I just realized both of our screens say Robin. Robin and I, Robin and I, I'm Kelly, that's Robin. Robin and I have put together several resources on COVID-19 that might be helpful. And we wanted to share one of them today, or at least a part of one of them. I'm going to pull that up now.
Great.
So in this resource, it was created to look at the background and the techniques to mitigate the psychosocial impact of COVID-19. So really that means, why is this happening and what are we going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
So we go through a lot about chronic stress and how the body responds to chronic stress. But what we really want to get to, because we're pretty practical gals, is how we can use that information and translate that into techniques, things that we can do to reduce stress and reduce anxiety. So Robin, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, sure. So this one to me is one that often people give me sort of the duh response when I say, are you breathing? But I'll tell you lately when I ask people, are you breathing? I've been getting some different answers, like, funny you should ask because I caught myself holding my breath the other day, or, variations on that theme. And really, deep breathing is number one on the list because it is the most accessible, practical, easy, essentially, technique that you can use anytime, anywhere. And the thing that we love about it is that, number one, we know that it actually helps because it stimulates the vagus nerve. It stimulates the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps to counter the overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, or that fight or flight response that makes you all anxious and jittery and tense and agitated. So we know that this is a really easy and accessible method. It is also something that is really well studied. And I actually want to just remind you that you probably already do this in times during your daily life that you don't even notice. So if you've ever practiced yoga or meditation, you've probably done this. But even if you've ever had to give a talk in front of a big crowd and you're nervous, or if you're nervous flying on an airplane or something, you might actually find yourself in preparation for that nerve-inducing situation doing something like, okay, getting prepared. And I think that's like the instinctive drive to help your body engage its parasympathetic nervous system response. So this diaphragmatic breath work one is really important. And we go into more detail other places, and certainly you can find out from the internet or other places on how to do it. But deep breathing is a really critical tool.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that what we want to emphasize too is you don't have to do these things all of the time when you're breathing. We just want you to think about how can you incorporate a little bit more of these techniques into your day, because over time, those little changes that you're making are really going to add up, and they're going to start showing you the results in your life.
And also, Kelly, I'll just add, when you started that, I was thinking, you also don't have to do it on a meditation pillow
No,
in your, some quiet Zen space.
no.
This you can do sitting at your desk. You can do it if you ever drive in the car again. These are, or in the moment of anxiety. If you find that your heart is racing, that you're feeling really anxious, taking some really slow, deep breaths that pull your breath all the way down, sort of into the bottom of your lungs, if you can imagine that, and slowly let it out, can actually help calm and bring down that response.
And I think sometimes people are hesitant to do it in front of others, which I totally get. And I think that practicing it on your own is really important. But I also think that when we do it in front of others, even if that's just our partner or our kids or whoever's around us, they are going to see what we're doing and be curious about it. And they're going to maybe want to do it too. And I think that that can only be beneficial for everyone.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Number two, we're going to talk about is eating whole foods. Now, again, I'm going to go back to this idea of just making small changes. The reason this is here primarily is because when we are in the stress response, our body naturally craves sugar, carbohydrates, and fat. In part because when we're in that fight or flight feeling, we need the fuel to get away or to fight quickly. So when that comes up, we can think our evolutionary responses for that, and then ask if there's a different way that we can help ourselves to feel better in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is with having whole foods here, if you're able to get whole foods in your house, and I know that that can be challenging now for a number of different reasons, having those available and in your environment is going to make it easier to eat them. I mean, just like deep breathing seems like common sense, that seems like common sense. But I know for me, we sort of went into a bit of do we need to buy like a whole bunch of stuff that's going to last for a long time, right? These shelf stable, sometimes carb laden,
Yeah.
fat laden foods. And when they're around, guess what? I'm going to eat them just because they're there. So it's important to have your environment set up to try to help you even in this time. So if that means getting deliveries from the store that are more whole food focused, having that stuff there can be really, really helpful.
I can't tell you how many times working with clients around weight management things over the years, I've said, just buy the darn cut up fruit if if
Yep.
it's in your budget and you can afford it, because people will say things like, I buy the whatever it is, the pineapple, and then it sits on my counter and rots. But if I buy the cut pineapple, as guilty as it makes me feel in some ways, I actually eat it. And so obviously not everyone can do that, but if that's in your budget and you can do that, but you just tell yourself you shouldn't, then maybe question that, because the goal here is to actually just make small micro changes that support your body and your mental health feeling as well as you can.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about this is we're going to talk more about self-talk and language coming up, but when we tell ourselves that we have to eat these kind of foods, think about that. Like that just doesn't feel good in your system. That feels restrictive. It feels like someone's, pointing their finger at you. But if you can switch that to think about, wow, I get to eat these foods, I get to cut up these foods, I get to ingest these naturally sweet and delicious things, that can be a big motivator to doing it.
Yeah. And if you are watching this and you watched our talk yesterday, you'll know that we are not preaching that you should be trying to focus on weight loss right now if that's not what feels right to you. Much the opposite, just really thinking about taking care of your physical and mental health in ways that are doable in this crisis that we're all going through. And the first two that we reviewed today are really sort of basics, but sometimes when the whole world has been shaken up like a snow globe, you might find that going back to basics is a really helpful strategy for you. So I guess we're going to cover the rest of these in segments over the course of maybe next week, I guess.
Yeah. And so we encourage you to just think about which ones might work for you and try them on. Just experiment with them. Try using breathing as an experiment. We don't want to do all or nothing thinking when it comes to these strategies, just taking them in a little bit at a time and trying them out.
Right. Okay. See you next time.